Hello and welcome to another Light Reading podcast. My name is Phil Harvey. I'm an editor at Light Reading.
I'm Claude Aiken. I'm Chief Strategy Officer at NextLink Internet.
Claude, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely happy to be here.
And we're at the Network X Americas show in Irving, Texas. In case you hear rustling and noises and voices and things like that, it's not things from your childhood coming back at you. It's actually ambient noise. So so just deal with that as you can. But I wanted to find out first of all about NextLink. If you dig into the Light Reading archives, you've seen that we've covered your company a time or two as an ISP, and I'd be really interested to know how things have been going the past couple of years, and then I do want to get into what's happening with BEAD funding and the journey you've taken there. So let's start with the past. Bring me up to date, and then we'll talk about what the strategy is going forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So for those of your listeners who may not know, NextLink Internet, we're a rural-based, rural-focused provider of primarily broadband service, but also voice and video and a couple other things out there as well. We are a regional provider. We're in 8 states now, expanding to 12 over the course of the next year or so.
Wow. Okay.
Not the whole state, but for bits and pieces, the rural areas.
Okay.
But yeah, we're about a 12-year-old company. We are technology agnostic. We use whatever tool gets the job done because some of these rural areas are very, very hard to reach. Have seen historically a lot of growth through some of the federal programs that are designed to support rural broadband. So what really grew the company from a mid-sized Texas-based provider to a regional provider was the FCC's Connect America Fund program back in 2018. And then we saw another significant juice through the FCC's RDOF program. So rural areas are really tough to get expensive infrastructure out to, which is why you've seen a lot of money spent on these things. But we've been, probably since the last time you wrote about us, we've just been executing on that kind of growth, and thankfully are ahead of schedule on a lot of our builds. So
yeah, we've sort of pointed out that you guys are kind of a case study in getting the by whatever means necessary, connecting people and making them, giving them some kind of choice, in some of these markets, because fiber only goes so far in some markets. Some markets have fiber, weirdly enough. Some have none whatsoever. And, it's nice that you guys are not on one side of the fence or the other. You can just adapt to whatever. I'm interested to know, how much fixed wireless, because that seems to be a big band-aid for a lot of rural areas, and the connection quality is way better than it has been, ever. Are you guys using that much, or is you finding that to be a good tool?
We've seen a significant improvement in the quality and the ability of fixed wireless gear over the course of the past I would say probably over the past 5 years, right? Historically, it was, probably if you look back to the company's founding, like 10, 11 years ago, the gear was somewhat finicky. You needed line of sight. It was limited in the bandwidth that it could provide. But now you've got fixed wireless gear that you can point in the opposite direction of where the house is, bounce it off a barn, and it still gets up to gigabit speeds. So it's pretty fantastic.
Because that's the other sort of issue with rural America is it's not all just flat and barren like Texas. Even in Texas,
it is not.
There's the hill country, and there's all kinds of geological interference that you'll run into. And then when you get into small towns, there's 100-year-old buildings that have been there, that have whatever it is that blocks signals.
Yes, indeed. Yes,
So
indeed.
there's all kinds of stuff there. What's it look like? Well, how big is the network now? How many people are connected to it, or how do you guys measure it in terms of, when you're describing
Sure.
yourself to someone else? What is your measuring stick?
Sure. So we probably have in excess of 2,600 towers deployed on the fixed wireless side of things. We've got tens of thousands of fiber passings as well that are in queue and live today. Uh, the fiber tends to be predominantly in areas where you've got more density,
Hmm.
which makes sense. And the wireless tends to be a little bit more in the rural countryside, right?
Sure.
The challenge there are challenges to both, and we use whatever tool and the toolkit makes sense for the scenario.
With the How do you plan? I mean, since your strategy's right there in your title. When you're looking at expansion, what do you size up? How do you size up? What markets are appropriate? Um, what method do you decide the methodology, or do you just put in, have input? I'd love to know like how you go about, when the CEO says it's time to grow.
Yeah.
What do you come back with?
I mean, it really is. Internet service and broadband expansion is so highly localized,
Yeah.
right? And we kind of go back to the technology, right? We've got to figure out how to get connectivity to people, where there may be, just a handful of people per square mile. And you kind of contrast that with an urban area where you've got relatively mature infrastructure. Everyone's pretty well packed in, so uh, you've got a couple of service calls. Your tech is hitting, maybe driving a mile or two and is hitting 3 or 4 service calls in a day.
Right.
Our folks may be driving 100 miles between
Wow.
service calls. So it just is, it's a different world when you're talking about rural. But kind of back to the highly localized piece,
Yeah.
if you're thinking about, well, there may be enough density here to justify a fiber deployment, but you take a look at the soil conditions and it's largely rock. Well, that just multiplied the cost of that fiber build by 10. Conversely, you think you could be doing well with a fixed wireless build, but there's a lot of ground clutter that may make the propagation not work quite as well as you wanted it to. And so that kind of goes back to the tools in the toolkit, right? It's a highly localized decision.
Okay.
Based on the conditions on the ground and what we think is going to make the most sense. Because at the end of the day, we want to serve the community with high quality service. I mean, we didn't get to a point where we have 12,000 Google reviews at 4.8 out of 5 stars by by not trying to put the customer first.
Wow. Yeah. That's a lot for an ISP.
I know it's
That's a good ratio.
it's a pretty good ratio, and we're pretty jealous about keeping that
Sure.
keeping that good. So customer service is pretty key. So we don't want to deploy a technology where the customer is going to have a bad experience, whether it's fixed wireless or fiber.
So this really is you have to visit it, scope it out, give an idea, have an idea of not just what technology you'd like to use, but really look around and make sure that the technology is possible to use.
Right.
And then, you've got to connect to something. So you've got to figure out who owns whatever it is you're connecting to and how to get there. So yeah, it's not a non-trivial decision to start up service in a new town for you guys.
Yeah. You might see you might be in a community that doesn't like new tower construction. So
Sure.
you're on water tanks or grain legs,
Right.
or you've got a community that doesn't know where their buried gas or water infrastructure is, and so it's challenging to do fiber there. So
Yeah.
it comes back to the local
Well,
conditions on the ground.
and then you've got the politics of it all. Some towns,
Yes.
as I've learned in my years as a journalist, that some towns are the mayor and the coroner and the county doctor are all the same guy. and you gotta
You've got to navigate
navigate
that. You've got to
those
navigate
waters as
that.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a really good point because that has driven some of the projects as well, right? I like to compare something that we did in Wise County, Texas, just down the road from here.
Yeah.
Where this was a couple years ago, but the county leadership really felt like their rural areas were not being served well, and they wanted to really amp up the quality of coverage in the rural countryside and do it quickly, right? So we worked with them on a project to get 95% of the county covered with up to 500 megabit fixed wireless service in 7 months.
Wow.
That was a project that won awards from the National Association of Counties, been spoken
Nice.
of positively in the Dallas Morning News. And that's a largely fixed wireless project. And then conversely, you have a fiber project that we've partnered with a county in Nebraska to do. It covers 950 homes versus the 65,000 people covered in Wise County, and it's 10 times as expensive.
Right.
So it kind of comes down to some of those local value judgments, right? What that community wants, and they're willing to wait years for that fiber to be deployed. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's where I get a lot of I was just at a smart cities conference. I know smart cities isn't a quote unquote telco market, but a lot of the city leaders there have interesting stories about broadband, and we're
Right.
definitely covering the digital divide. And yeah, you can't start out a conversation thinking you know what they're going to say because of what the last guy said. They're all so completely different. Their views on what suffices good connectivity. Some of them are hell bent on building something that's going to last 100 years. Some of them know that the election's in November, and they just gotta tack something up quick so they can talk about it on the campaign.
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
Is being in this industry, nothing lasts 100 years.
Yeah.
Things
You're
are constantly changing.
You're stuck in the middle of that decision process,
Right.
having to wait on those checks to cash.
Absolutely.
Well, so speaking of funding, what is the situation? You're speaking here about BEAD funding and about what's happening nationwide. It's interesting to get a localized point of view. How difficult has that process been for you as an ISP? And do you feel like the dollars maybe in Texas and in other states are going to reach the places that need them the most?
Yeah, I think BEAD is a challenging program, and it's been the timeline from when the law was passed a couple years ago to the point where we are now, where we still haven't seen dollars flowing to internet service providers to deploy. It takes, kind of to the earlier point, sometimes it takes government a long time to get things working and to get things right, which is okay, and which makes sense.
Sure.
When you're talking about a $42 billion plus program, you want that money to be spent well. The BEAD program is interesting in that it really leverages the model of states as laboratories of experiment, right? You have a federal framework that sets the ground rules, but then each state is able to play within that as they see fit.
So we're back to 50 different opinions on what color the sky is, right?
Yes, yes. And you see that in diverse approaches to pretty much every non-mandatory requirement under the program. There's an affordability component.
Sure.
Some states are saying it has to be $30 a month or less. Others are kind of pegging it to other benchmark pricing. And that has a significant impact on the economics of deployment. And so we have to take things like that into account. You have certain states that say your temporary contractors have to be, pay full wages, benefits, and 401k. Other states don't. We have to factor that into the model as well. And those are the public policy choices that are still being made right now. So it's still kind of a little bit premature to say how this is all going to work out. For us, we're working towards participation in the program. Um, it probably is going to be really challenging for some of the super small localized folks because of just all of these legal and regulatory requirements. It's a compliance manager's dream.
Right, sure.
Uh,
Yeah. That gives me chills.
yeah.
Oh, I hate to hear that. That's somebody walking around with clipboards and spreadsheets making my life horrible. Well, I mean, even in Texas, I mean, what are some of the, just to give a localized example, because you do serve a lot of customers in the state,
We do.
and there are, I mean, throw a rock and you can hit a rural community here, you
Yes.
know? So what, and there, and and I've tried Wi-Fi and most of them, they all suck. What is what are the ground rules, that the state broadband office is setting here? Are
Yeah.
they getting, are they emphasizing speed to deployment? Do they want fiber in the ground for 100 years? Or do they think magic happens?
I think Texas has really done a great job of interacting with the provider community and listening to some of the concerns and the hurdles that that we as providers who are trying to serve rural areas face. So they're still waiting for final approval from NTIA on kind of their master plan for BEAD.
Right.
But we've been really encouraged by the approach that they've taken so far. There are a lot of unserved locations in Texas, and
Yeah.
the way the federal government designed the program is it's kind of it's intention, right? You've got to get everybody served, but you have also got to preference fiber, which is the most expensive technology to deploy. So
Wow.
having state offices that may have just been stood up a year ago grapple with some of these policy choices that folks at the federal level that have been wrestling with this for like 20, 30 years
Yeah.
haven't been able to fully solve. I think Texas is doing a great job with the resources that it has, and we'll see what comes out at the end of the tunnel, but so far Texas is doing a great job.
Do you have a glimpse of a timeline in terms of when? Well, I guess it's up to the NTIA to approve their master plan, and
Right.
then we start the clock. So to
Yeah,
speak.
yeah. So Texas will be looking to start finalizing what locations are eligible in July.
Okay.
At which point after that they'll be greenlit to actually get the grant program kicked off. But they've got to get final approval from the feds before they can do that second part.
But hopefully, at least in the localized state office, somebody understands that trenching fiber in red clay is not the easiest thing in the world.
Yeah, for sure. I think there is certainly a recognition in the state that you're, kind of to the point that I was making earlier, that you really do need all tools in the toolkit to get the job done. Whether it's fiber, fixed wireless, satellite, what have you. I think there are just so many locations in Texas that need help that folks are coming at this clear-eyed that it's not going to be fiber everywhere.
Yeah, not everywhere. Like I know that some of the pressure groups would prefer that, and I think some of the telcos even want that to be the case. But I think just like I said, if anybody who takes a good long drive between, like, say, here in San Antonio would understand, or here in Houston would understand that the geography changes 6-7 times, and geologically speaking, it's it's a real roll of the dice, depending on where you think you're going to put fiber,
Yeah.
and what you're going to get.
Absolutely.
But there's also the affordability thing too, and I think that's the other thing that driving around helps in this state and probably others, where you understand that the income disparity in this state is maybe as wide as could humanly be possible,
Right.
and still be called the United States. It really is, like I said, it's not just, you're not just traveling distance, it's time travel in this state in some parts. And I think that's part of what makes it an interesting place to live, but I think that's also what makes it a particularly, maybe a more challenging place to cover, in terms of providing the same service everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for uniformity, this is not the place to find it, either economically or infrastructure wise.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes back to my earlier point, right? It's so highly localized, and so you've got to make localized, technological decisions on what you're going to do to meet the needs of that community, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because fixed wireless is more affordable to deploy than fiber is. So if you're trying to both reach that ranch that has the half a mile driveway,
Mm-hmm.
and then also help grandma who's on a fixed income afford
Right.
service in that same sort of general area, you might make a different choice than if you're trying to serve, downtown Dallas.
Right. And to clarify, when I said driving around, I only go on the paved roads, so I have no idea what else is out there.
We've got a number of off-road vehicles,
Right.
in our
Yeah, I can only go
state,
so far.
yeah.
So, well, what's coming up for NextLink then, in terms of what projects are in the works? I mean, obviously you've given us a preview a little bit,
Sure.
but are there anything in the works in the next 3 to 6 months we can look forward to with your company? And then and then is there anything that our audience needs to know about what you're doing? Anything you need audience engagement with, or more eyeballs on?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll take kind of the second one first.
Sure.
I think now is the time for your audience to be engaging on these critical policy issues, and to really let your both local and state representatives know where your needs are, what your preferences are, so that they can best represent you at the local, state, and federal level. In terms of overall plans, I mean, we're planning to continue to execute and work ahead of schedule on our big picture grant deadlines. We're planning on doing a lot of small town fiber, particularly in Texas in the near future.
Cool.
And then also just continuing to improve as best as possible how we can be continue to be rapidly focused on customer service and their quality of experience, right? I mean, you hear the term AI a lot these days. We're looking at that and how we can use that to make a customer experience better.
Okay.
How we can improve the quality of their in-home Wi-Fi connection, because that honestly has a much bigger impact on
Yeah.
your customer experience than anything going on
Than
further
anything
back in the network.
connecting to the home.
So-
Also, the in-home experiences. I mean, you guys can't just roll trucks like everybody in the in the cities.
Yeah, no, like I said, we get you have techs that are going 100 miles between service calls. The more we can automate and improve the intelligence of the network, the better off it is for both us and the customer.
Interesting. All right. Yeah, we'll leave it there for now, but we'll definitely keep talking and keep watching your progress. Claude, thank you so much for being on the Light Reading Podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.